and our regular Wednesday show where we are blessed with MacTheHuman. And Mac, you said you had a
Hello.
topic for today. Would you announce that, please?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about kind of the idea of immortality in Scripture and how let's say there's many references to eternal life and you know some kind of like dying and getting eternal life and I have a lot of questions about what that would really look like because well, okay, because this concept of a perfected body seems to be one of
Yeah.
those sci-fi willy-nilly new agey kind of a thing. Like it's not something we really know what it is. We don't. Is it going to be like a whole different shape and size and everything? Or is it? I mean, and also like what makes it immortal? Because I mean, beyond I know that you've talked about telomeres and the kind of the genetic component of aging and dying, but beyond
Sure.
that we also like wear out even anyway, like without that. So anyway, so I have a lot of questions about how real that is, and of course, what's usually generated by these conversations is some kind of comparison between your understanding of that and how most Christians understand that, or most theists understand that concept. So I'd like to go
Yeah.
down that road if we could. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's complicated. It's more complicated than just telomeres. You know, that's really a
Right.
gross
Exactly.
simplification. And although I play one on TV, I'm not actually a scientist. I'm not a biologist. So
Right.
I'm only like I'm only understanding it on like peace and respect, Francis. I'm only respecting. I'm only understanding it on like a layman's level. You know.
Okay.
Although whenever I look deeper and someone challenges me, like discovering history with Pat Lowinger,
Oh, sure.
he brought up that he'd heard me say something like human beings, females are born with every egg they'll ever have. Well, it's that's sort of true. It's accurate enough for what I'm talking about, but it's not biologically accurate. That they're not actually eggs yet. Okay, fine.
Oh, I see.
Um, they're not actually eggs. They're follicles that will someday become eggs.
Uh,
All right, and that not all of the follicles will become eggs. Not every follicle becomes an egg. That's also not true. But the baseline idea that female human has the ability to produce some 300,000 of them, where they're only going to use about 480 to 500 of them in menstrual cycles on this earth in a healthy lifetime.
that's
That is
interesting.
true. That is absolutely true. That we have way, way, way too many and plenty to restock the earth and even fill all of heaven beyond that
Uh-huh.
in healthy females. We plenty, no problem at all.
Of course, that's common. That's a common biological strategy, right? Like trees that produce way
Overdo
more
it.
seeds than ever become trees, and pollen is like that too. Sperm is like that.
Yeah,
Way more
sure.
than we'll ever use.
Oh
Hopefully.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
If it was 100% efficient, you'd only
Yeah.
have to produce one sperm cell, like once a month,
Right.
and I mean, and it would all line up, and that would be it. And
Right.
the females would have 485 eggs or something. And that would be like no extras, and that would be very efficient, and it would actually make better sense in a natural kind of an evolutionary process. It would actually make sense to not spend all the excess energy to create things that you're not using. You know,
Yeah.
so
So the cost must
not
be
100%
worth it.
efficient.
So are you
Right.
are you pointing to kind of the idea that all of these eggs indicate that there's obviously there is potential for more reproduction than most women occur that any woman goes through, but even
Sure.
Catholic women. But the but are you saying that like this indicates that women are meant to live longer than they do, and men as well?
Oh
Is
yeah,
that sort of
yeah. In
evidence
fact,
of that?
all flesh. In fact, all flesh.
Okay.
Dogs that go to heaven
Uh-huh.
will become eternal dogs, for instance.
All right.
And it's only the batches that get put onto an earth that are genetically restricted so that they age and die. That all flesh is meant to live forever.
Huh.
And we have just a handful of examples on the earth already,
Right.
which is what you were talking about. If a person just Googles, you could even say it wrong. You could even Google like immortal animals,
Right. Yeah.
right?
I've done that. It's really
Which
cool.
really it's yeah, which it's not. I'm saying eternal because they could be killed. They're not immortals, you know.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I don't know. Refresh me or say something definitive or
What does Scripture say? Does it say eternal or immortal?
okay. Okay, so I can only think of two places where this is even mentioned.
Okay.
One of them is in chapter 6 of the book of Genesis, where it talks about the original sin of the Nephilim and how that's a disruption of the natural order of things and that it can't be physically repaired. You can't take a Nephilim and make them an eternal being in heaven because they're actually a different animal. Okay?
Okay.
So they have to they have to have that replaced, their flesh replaced, which is not the same thing as damnation. It's not a judgment of a spirit of a person or what they become. It's only a judgment on the flesh, and the flesh is what the flesh is. So I imagine there's some kind of heavenly process where they eliminate the Nephilim genetics from them and then recreate them, and they were what they were supposed to be in the first place. If that made
Interesting.
sense. Okay. So
Kind of an
so they're
arm
not damned
shortening.
just for being a Nephilim. Yeah, an arm
Yeah.
shortening.
Yeah. Procedure.
A little bit of genetic humility where pride is obviously a huge problem for those folks.
Right.
And just being tyrannical in a lot of their behaviors. Not all of them, not the tall people who come from tall families, but
Right.
the tall people who come from short families. They tend to be tyranny driven, and they tend to be godless, and they tend to be, I don't know, not awesome for a person. But
Right.
that's not their damnation. It's just the damnation of the flesh, which is no big deal really. Anyone who dies goes through that anyway.
Right.
Having a little trouble getting collected today. A little bit distracted. You'll forgive me.
It's okay. It's the
Sometimes the boss calls too much. You know how
Oh,
that goes.
sure. I definitely know how that goes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. Well,
Okay.
let's
All right.
let's
Let me
skip
see if
to
I can just
bosses.
power through it and get on
Okay.
topic.
Yeah. All right, go ahead.
Peace and respect, Skyworks, and also Hillary's emails. Okay, so the text reads in chapter 6 of the book of Genesis, quoting from the Father, which a lot of Christians think is God, and it's even translated as God, but it's someone compliant with God saying what our situation is. I will not always strive with man, yet that he is flesh, his days shall be numbered 120 years. Okay, so the word yet there is the key word that Christians are, I don't know, whatever they're doing to get rid of it or
Right.
to kind of flip it over and make it something that it doesn't mean. But in a very literal reading, it means yet means exactly what you think yet means. It's an unrealized thing
Right.
or it's despite the fact. Well, unrealized thing doesn't make sense as a usage there in context, but despite the fact does. So if I just change it to the phrase despite the fact, so I will not always strive with walk beside. That's what strive with. Not it doesn't mean
Okay.
fight.
Right.
I will not always walk beside man, despite the fact that he has flesh. His days shall be numbered 120 years.
Huh.
So it's saying, in spite of flesh, you will die.
Wow. Oh, that's a vastly different interpretation when you read
Yes.
it that way,
Yeah.
because that implies that the flesh is what
Meant
brings
to
you
live
to,
forever.
yeah, is meant to
Yeah.
live forever. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. And when we see animals that don't have that restriction, they do.
Yeah.
It's not that they have something extra. They're actually missing something.
Oh,
They're
interesting.
missing the restriction. They don't have anything extra.
Huh.
They're missing the what we called a microRNA blocker, and
Okay.
so they completely code. And because they don't have the blockage, they live forever. Which is, you're like, what? Yes, that's right. They
Yeah,
don't
that's
have a
crazy.
blockage. So, and you can tell by how
Huh.
long the lifespan of the critter is, how restricted they are. The more restricted they are, the quicker they die.
How about that?
So it seems evident to me in biology. I
So,
mean, think
yeah.
about biology.
Okay.
If you have perfect cell replication, right, and the cells are doing what they're supposed to do, why would you age? I
Well,
mean,
I
that's just the
guess,
most unnatural thing. Go
I
ahead.
mean, the way that I've kind of comprehended that is, um, it's kind of like the you look at the entire species instead of the individual, and death is good for a
Mm-hmm.
species, um,
Sure.
and
In a restricted environment.
that's right, in a restricted environment, yeah, with limited resources, etc.
Sure.
And I guess kind of in a social order context, you could speculate that the idea of death, and I think that this is scriptural as well, is a motivating force. People, because it limits, not just our environment's limited, but our actual time to operate is limited, and so we
Mm-hmm.
think about things like legacy and what we can accomplish for the future, what we can build into the worlds that will have some lasting effect, or at least the more conscientious people do that. Thankfully, they've done that
Yeah.
because we've gotten things like scientific progress out of that that urgency, to get stuff done.
I
Um,
actually think that it's anti evolutionary that we age. Okay? Here's why I think that.
hmm,
As a singular individual consciousness progresses through time, they learn.
that's true.
Now, it learning how to survive, how to produce for others,
Uh-huh.
it's easier to keep that in one individual than it is to pass it to another.
That's true.
So and the more communication is restricted and difficult, the more it makes sense that an animal would live longer and have fewer offspring, and that would result in better efficiency and more likely for that species to survive.
Interesting.
And the further back you go, the worse that problem becomes. So it actually makes better sense to me that an evolutionary process should have resulted in, on Satan's planet, for instance, there are still
Uh-huh.
dinosaurs. And there are dinosaurs that don't age, and it's only that things kill them, that
Huh.
they don't just keep growing in population forever. That actually makes better sense. Because the communication problem and the learning process and how advantageous it is to know things versus being ignorant of those things in a survival situation.
Right.
So actually what I think we should see is few animals living forever. That's what we should see. But we don't. Especially in the more
Right.
conscious animals. Especially in those. And the opposite of that is, of course, instinctual survival, where the animal's simple enough it doesn't even know why it's doing. It doesn't even think about that it's doing something.
Sure.
It doesn't even think about that.
Yeah.
It just acts.
Insects
And
and
that's
stuff.
all pre-programmed genetically. Yeah, it's all
Right.
it's an all genetic pre-programming.
Right.
That they're going to act in a certain way in a certain situation, and that causes them to survive. Now that makes sense at that level in a naturalistic process. It totally makes sense. But this looks, for the higher animals that are here that age and die, that looks completely made up to me. It looks completely contrived. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. Other than the intention that it would age and die. Peace and respect our dying son, Ed. Let me answer this real quick because it's been up there a while and a few people have asked and etc.
You
like
bet.
that.
Yeah. I can't see the chat, just
Sky-
so everybody knows.
Yeah, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. You don't have to run the show, although you're a very
That's
very
good.
important part of it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so Skyworks 600 asked the question: is God an entity or merely an idea? Okay, so I look at all of the ancient stories, and it seems to me consistent. And it's spelled out very specifically in the Bible, and Christians will deny the Bible even though they think they say it's their fundamental belief system. It's really not. It says, first of all, there's two different usages, actually three different usages of the word God. There's God Elohim, which breaks down into evil and good Elohim. Okay, so it's a group of powerful beings that are either good or evil. We call the good ones angels. We call the bad ones demons. Okay, in colloquial concept. And then there's the Jehovah. Now the Jehovah is spirit. It says so, is spirit. Just, in fact, the word is isn't even there. It's just Jehovah spirit. That's the same thing twice, right? And then it identifies what it means by spirit. And when it describes spirit, it says there's 7 fundamental spirits and a lot of repercussions. I'm not going to even go into the repercussions of these because there's too many to talk about ever, which is why no man can wrap their mind around God. No one thing can contain God. It's too much because all of the repercussions of these. And it lists them specifically, and I don't have to guess at all because it creates a list. Wisdom, knowledge, counsel, understanding, fear, power, and conservation. Now those seem like, I'm not sure, but they seem super fundamental to me. Like I've tried, I can't improve on the list. That seems like the most fundamental set of ideals. And with that basic 7 set, why it's 7, I have no idea. That basic 7 set, that you can have all possible good repercussions come from just that 7. So it might be the perfect set. I can't say. But it seems really good for what kind of animal we are, what kind of animal I am. That without wisdom, I don't survive. Right? And so we got to like pass down wisdom. Like you can eat that, you don't eat that. Wisdom. Okay? And knowledge. Well, without knowledge of like the English language, I can't speak English. I can't communicate without the knowledge of some language, whether that's physically acting out words or some. I need something, and all of them, in fact, all the way up to the most refined one, which is, it's not said directly in the text. It's only described in the text. There's no specific word anywhere in the text of the Bible that says conservationism or conservation. but it does have a place where an angel of God describes himself, and he is describing conservation. Okay, so that's one of the spirits of God. It's the most refined one, and you could even say something like, it took us to about some 40 years ago out of 200,000 years to get to, oh my gosh, we have to conserve stuff. We just found that out. And it's super important, and we've been wasting this whole time. We've just been using up materials like there's no end to them, and that's just not true. So conservation is an important aspect of what is God. Okay, and then there's the Yod Hey Vav Hey, which is the roots of the word Jehovah. And here's what the Yod Hey Vav Hey literally is, and why you've heard things probably like the Hebrew language. Each each letter of their alphabet has intrinsic meaning, and you can't just throw away the intrinsic meaning and ignore it. And the reason that is that language, it's very environmentally attached. It's physical. It's two-dimensional imaging of three-dimensional things that exist in reality, and those kinds of concepts. So the Yod, which is, I don't know if I'm facing this the right way, you'll have to forgive me, but from above the wrist, that's the letter Yod. It literally means an open hand. In fact, it means an open hand of power. So it's like if you're offering someone's your hand to help them up, you're not gonna give them a fist, because a fist can't grasp and help. Okay. So you've got the Yod, which is the hand of power, and then you've got the Hey, which is a house. I might be doing this backwards to you. I don't know. You've got the Hey, which is a house, or the four corners of where you live, which also means the four corners of the earth where you live, because this is looked at from the perspective of heaven, from off the earth. So you've got or this could be where the angels live if it's referring to angels. So this could mean heaven, and this could mean earth. It could mean either one. All right. And then you've got the Vav. Now the Vav is, I can't do it well with my hand, and you have to kind of ignore this part. You have to kind of ignore this part over here and just kind of look at that. It's a tent peg.
Huh.
And what a tent peg does is it's a way to anchor a tent to the earth, right? To tie one thing to another. And that's what the Vav means. And then you've got another Hey. So the sentence is either the hand of power with which earth is tied to heaven, or the hand of power with which heaven is tied to earth. Okay, so it's a commitment, is what it is. It's literally a covenant. That the God Yod Hey Vav Hey is a covenant. That's what the God is. Well, a covenant between who? Heaven and earth. That's obvious in the story. Who has to hold to this covenant? Well, obviously we don't have to hold to this covenant. We haven't even all accepted this as a covenant. Have the angels accepted it as a covenant? Yes. It's a guide for them. So it's the hand of God, the powerful hand of God, with which angels are tied to the earth. That's why it's a covenant. All that makes sense?
So the answer is neither. It's
Yeah, the answer is neither. Yeah.
not merely an idea, that's for sure.
No.
Um,
So the group of angels that conduct end times are following Jehovah. In fact, Jehovah has demands of them. And they are compelled to carry out, because of their alignment to Jehovah, this covenant. They are compelled to do a lot of things. So, it has positive and negative demands of them.
right.
And of course the hero the hero of the story, he has to follow it too, because he is that pontificator, that bridge builder that help people accept the truth when it comes. So he is under the contract.
Okay.
But then it says there'll be a new covenant when that covenant is done away with.
Right.
Um, and the reason there would be a new covenant is because you're no longer on the earth. So it's a whole new
Right.
deal,
Right. No,
which
no need
means
for
there's
a
never
connection.
been a second covenant. And when it talks about the second covenant, that hasn't happened yet, which is how you can have atheists.
I guess it would be well, you can at least get rid of the tent peg because we don't need the connection anymore. You know,
Right.
it's identical. Our home in heaven.
Yeah. In fact, you could
Yeah.
reduce it at that point. You could just reduce it to the Yod Hey.
Right. Yod Hey.
It's just the rules of heaven, and that's it.
Right. So, if I'm understanding, the specifics of the contract are all of the Mosaic laws and stuff, right? Probably more than that too, but all the
What, say it again. Start
uh,
again, because I got my brain got lost.
no, that's okay. The specifics of the Yad He Vauhe contract that you say the angels are beholden to and the hero is beholden to. That's
Yeah.
those specifics are, among those specifics probably are the Mosaic laws. Um,
No.
Presumably, no. Oh no. Okay.
Unless you just mean
So
the
I don't
Ten
understand.
Commandments. I think, from what I can tell, the Ten Commandments apply in heaven,
Well, they say
and they
that
obviously don't apply here.
they say that Christ fulfilled the law. You know that he was the only one that ever followed all the laws and all the
I believe he
that
will. Yeah.
that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
that would go beyond the Ten Commandments. That would go into all the laws, right? Like all the Levitical laws
Sure.
and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. All
So
of Deuteronomy, Leviticus, all of it. Yes.
right, right.
Uh,
But that's
but
not the
if it's
contract.
true that no, that's not the contract that angels have with Earth. No,
Oh, okay.
that's how to run an army. That's how to be a
Oh,
commander of an army.
okay.
That's why it's
Okay, I
kind of
didn't. Yeah.
oversimplified, because it's militaristic. It's not don't eat pork because pork is bad for you. It's don't even come close to trying to like feed yourself. Just depend on heaven for food. And I'm sorry that's you're
Right.
getting the same diet every week, but it's really good food and you're going to be okay. And don't eat stuff. You know,
Oh, interesting.
don't
Yeah.
change your uniform. You're in the military. Don't change your uniform. You wear the clothes I gave you.
Right.
Um,
Right.
you don't know enough about medicine, but here's some two dichotomous description of what is leprosy and what cannot be leprosy. And if you're going to engage with someone and they have this kind of sore on them, you'll know not to touch them because they have leprosy. Under just this really dichotomous, simple explanation of what leprosy is.
Oh, wow.
So then, the
Sure.
disciples have these very simple, very basic militaristic law that they follow when they follow the Lamb wherever he goes, so that they don't like. It's to keep them from getting killed. It's to keep them from catching diseases that have to, gives them a day off, a sick day. You don't want them to
Right.
have a sick day.
Right.
Uh, you want them to be there protecting the teachers. That's why they're there.
Right.
Um, so it makes really good sense in that context. And in fact, all of the law works really well for and the only exception, we actually point out the exceptions, and we have a lot of debates about the exceptions to the militaristic law. I said a belief held in the minds of theists. Not exactly Skyworks, because when you say theists, you're saying so many things. I mean, it's almost a meaningless word at this point, isn't it? You have to say what kind of theist, or I can't even talk about what that means. In fact, same thing for the word atheist. You have to tell me what kind of atheist. Or if you'd personalize that and say what you actually think is true, then I probably could answer to you directly. But I can't answer this in this structure. Not that I'm trying to degrade you at all. It's just be more defined because my brain needs it. And call it my fault. So the exceptions to that are the ones that you hear the biggest debates to, which are
Baptism.
and
Um, I guess you know, I
the
don't
ones
know.
you
There's
hear
a
the
lot of
debates
big
on.
ones. Are you talking about
No.
inside of churches?
The
Or?
law debates.
Oh, the law
The
debates.
law.
Oh, you're talking
Between
about abortion,
atheist and believer, the law debate. What?
abortion, abortion, and like gay rights and well, minority rights in general. you know,
Sexuality, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and slavery.
Slavery, sure, yeah,
Okay, now what are those conversations? Because it looks legalistic, but it's not Levitical law, which is
right.
why the scholars will say, well, it's not law. You know, because they're right. It's not law. It's kind of a different. It's kind of a different conversation. It's more like it's not law. It's like suggestions of standards of living,
I
right?
mean,
That's how the scholars look at it. Go ahead.
you don't want to fall in love with your bunkmate. You got to keep that very platonic.
Actually, the Romans held that made for good warriors.
Yeah, I don't.
If you
Yeah,
have
I
the
don't.
deeper love connection, the harder you'll fight for somebody.
Well, maybe that's true. I don't
Well,
want
that
my
seems true in
soldiers
nature.
messing around like that. I want them focused. Sleep with your rifle.
Well, what the Bible has is very young men who
Uh,
are very low maintenance with very little life experience, and it's chosen that as a warrior because they're not going to be warriors very long. So they're not interested in like developing a lot of loving relationships amongst the troops
oh,
like the
sure.
Romans did. They don't want that because it's only going to be 3.5 years anyway. They're not going to be warriors for life. They're just 3.5 year warriors.
Right.
That's it. Right. So that makes sense to me. It's more practical. And you don't really have time to have that kind of long term building of a warrior. You just don't have time for that. Okay.
That's crazy.
So
I'm gonna reread those books now. That's. Yeah.
oh,
I
there's
never
so much
thought
to be
that I'd
said
be
about all of
interested.
this.
Yeah, in reading those books again.
Dude,
But
I was reading this stuff and I was just like riveted. I couldn't believe it. I was like, geez, this is amazing.
wow.
This is so smart. Um, yeah, I didn't find it boring at all. In fact, I think it's funny. I could see that I'm totally off topic now. I could
That's
see
okay.
that the lineages were trying to say something deeper, but I couldn't tell what the deeper thing is
Uh huh.
until I went and looked up the words that are the names that make the lineages, and that tells the
Right.
story. And I was just like, of course that's there. Of course it's not a list of names because that's friggin' pointless.
Right.
Uh, so there was a prayer inspired intuition in that it would have a deeper meaning, and it does. Okay, so the slave laws where what came out as master is actually sovereign, talking about the sovereign, and the words father, meaning the slave's father, is the only exception to the sovereign. That makes sense if it's a discussion between the sovereign and the father. So when Christ picks up the Bible and he reads the Old Testament law on slavery, he goes, oh, this one's mine, this one's yours. This one's mine, this one's yours. This one's mine. Oh, it looks like you get 2/3 of them, and I get a little bit, around a third of the people of the population of this earth. That's what this looks like. And then it talks about like the exceptions even. If during end times someone who's already a follower of Christ but was a traditional Jew or a traditional Hindi
Uh huh.
who was following Krishna instead of Ram, uh, and but they fall in love and they have kids during that 3.5 years with the person of the other persuasion. They can run an awl through their ear to the doorpost, the entryway, and swear allegiance to the other building,
Oh.
that is the other heaven, then yeah, that totally, and it's so thorough. It covers like everything. It's amazing. Which is why, like in the year of Jubilee, a slave can go back to their father. That's why. Okay, so Jesus reading that goes, well, it looks like I don't get the whole earth, do I? Okay, cool. Because, Old Testament, and that was your story instead of my story, and you're the one that saved them, not me. And that makes sense. It's fair. All right? And then the promiscuity laws. Oh, peace and respect, Zebra. Come in if you want. Stay in the chat if you want. Do what you want.
Steve.
Love you. Can't. Okay. Well,
That's okay.
know you're loved. Know you're loved, and when you do make it, you're appreciated. In fact, I think sometimes you're doing this on purpose in order to gain the diamond, the refined, perfect diamond appearance. Oh, look, I will grace you on occasion. Look how special I am.
That's how I feel about it.
I'm just kidding, but I do value you. Actually, I do. And I don't care if you're doing it on purpose or just incidentally. Okay, so then you get into okay, I'm going to call it variant because it's literally variant. And if you're offended by the fact that you're a minority group, be offended. But you're actually in some kind of severe minority. If you are cross-dressing, that's a severe minority. If you're homosexual, that's a pretty small minority too. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right on down the line. Okay? You're just part of a small group.
Sure.
Are they condemning you because you're part of a small group or because of what you're doing? Neither one. It's not talking about condemnation. The condemnation is that in end times, you won't accept, it's using that group as an example of people who are outliers, who won't accept the obvious in front of you. It's not actually condemning homosexuality at all. What it's actually saying is, in a Venn diagram, you're trying to be this little tiny circle way off to the side. And if you were part of the large circle in the middle, then things would be much better for you. On like a personal and real level, you'd be better off. Why? Because you wouldn't be still traditional Jew or traditional Hindi, and you wouldn't be like rejecting heaven, staying on the earth while we're slowly destroying it.
Right.
Trust me, you'd be better off ascended. And that's what it's trying to say. So, and it's only Christian exceptionalism and pride that makes them say things like, that is a very nice thing to say, Skyworks. Thank you for that. It's only trying to say that if you're rejecting heaven while the earth is slowly being destroyed, you're being an idiot. Okay? Right. And in that situation, you would be.
Right.
Because you're like trying to stay on an earth that is being destroyed. Not smart. Not smart at all. And there was a larger point to that now has escaped me because Skyworks' kindness. I got distracted. Bring me back, Mac. What were we talking about there?
It's a gracious distraction.
Yeah.
We were talking about the Levitical laws and how they aren't the ones that are completely followed by the hero. They're not the Yad He Vav He. They are instead these fascinating military instructions or general instructions. You just moved on to general instructions to the survivors
for the Christ.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, I remember where I was now. The text troubles itself to not make you guess, which is really convenient. And Christians will normally ignore the description of, say, for instance, what an altar is. So we have churches, and in churches you got this wooden or stone structure on the front on stage, which the Bible says don't go up on stage. But
Huh.
but they have up there something they call an altar. All
Right.
right?
Right.
And traditionally to the Jew, an altar is it's more like a gas grill. You know, it's something
Oh.
that you cook and you make it'd be messy. It'd be something you have outside. You would never have that inside. That would be terrible.
Oh,
Peace and
sure,
respect to John.
because you're making offerings on it, right? Burnt offerings on
Right,
the altar. Oh, right, right. Okay.
right. You'd stink up the joint. Burning flesh stinks, bro. It's
Yeah.
terrible.
No, I hate it.
Like it all smells like burning feathers when the proteins start, you know, start reconstructing or deconstructing and become vapors. When proteins become vapors, it all smells like chicken feathers. It's just horrible. Um,
Oh,
I mean, it's terrible smell. But so they talk about the altar, and the altar has to have four gold or brass horns on it, and
all right.
it's hot underneath, and the flesh is on top, and the flesh gets cooked to the point you wouldn't want to try to eat it. It gets burnt,
Right.
like you couldn't eat it. Okay, and that's because the heat below and the flesh is on the surface. And,
Right.
dude, that's talking about destruction of the planet.
Oh,
Because if this were a lake of fire, that's literally what it would be. The heat from underneath has come up, and every flesh on top is burnt to a crisp. And the reason that God finds that pleasurable is because that's the end of suffering, the absolute end of all suffering of every human who has ever been on the planet. That's the end of it. The suffering's over. And that's why it's pleasant to God. Okay? That means that the contract is complete, and now Jehovah has a Sabbath day. It can rest.
sure.
You see how that works together?
Right.
Because that's the end of it.
Right.
It's at rest then. It's done.
Right.
All
Put it
right.
away. Put it
Right,
in the
put it
file.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah, until the end of the next earth when it's brought
Right.
back up again. All right. And there'll be a new batch of angels, perhaps some that did it before and really liked it and want to do it again or whatever. However that works, I don't know. The text doesn't go into that detail. But there's definitions of words, and then there's colloquial usage of words. When you have a colloquial usage of a word, you need to have a separate definition. For instance, F-bomb.
Uh-huh.
We all know what the literal word means and the physical act and all the repercussions of the physical act of effing. Okay?
Right.
But we don't always use it that way. And if someone uses it in a new and interesting way that you're not familiar with, you're going to have to figure out the context of what they meant.
Sure.
Of course, if they're doing that in some kind of social standard colloquial usage, it's easy to figure. You already know what they mean, right? It's not a problem. So because of that, the Bible has to give definitions when it's using a word colloquially and not definitionally true. And it does. Every time. Like when it says sword, it says sword means truth.
Right. That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when Jesus says to the apostles, go out and buy swords, and they say we were able to buy two. Do you think there was only two swords available? Do you know how many swords are all over this planet? No, because in end times there'll be few Bibles available. So they can only scare up two Bibles. And he goes, it'll be enough. Why is two enough? Because we can share a book.
Right.
And book is something that you do when you're sitting down and relaxed. That's when you book, right? So two is plenty for 12. Two Bibles is one Bible per 6 people. Is that enough? Yeah,
Sure. Yeah.
it's fine. No problem. And when it says altar, it describes an altar. That an altar has to be made of earth. It literally says an altar is to be made of earth.
Huh.
It literally says that. And then it describes an altar, and it would be describing the earth. Why they build a big wooden table in a church, I have no idea.
Huh.
Like what they ought to have there is a globe. That would make better sense. They ought to have a globe in front of the church, and they'd be like leaning on the globe and talking about the globe and talking about, the internal forces in the mantle and the core of the earth. That's what they ought to be talking about, but they're not. Because they're speaking it in, Christology.
Right.
They're speaking it in Christian language, and they don't have the decoding of it, so they don't look at it the right way. So it troubles itself, and it says what stone means. So all your sacrifices are to be made on an altar. Of course. Why would you be doing that in heaven?
Oh, right.
That would make no sense. That would be in heaven. If you tried to do that, people go, "What are you doing?" And oh, by the way, why? And then it describes stone, right? Like you should stone to death a homosexual, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I have no problem with that. You should stone a witch. I have no problem with that because it gives a definition for a stone. A stone has to be made of two parts. Those two parts have to have no tool lifted upon them. That is, no man can lift a tool upon it, right? And it has to contain the Word of God. I know of something that is written in stone that says you must never change it, that says you must never lift a tool upon it, that contains the Word of God. I know of such a thing. It's religions. And look around. You have Hinduism and Buddhism, Old and New Testament. You have Judaism and Christianity, Old and New Testament. You have, and it just goes on and on and on like that. And that is the stone, the unchanging stone. Why is it unchanging? Because it doesn't matter what you think. It matters that angels keep to it. And it matters that the hero keeps to it. It can't be changed. It'll never be changed. And that's the case in the end of every earth. So, what does it mean to stone someone? We say it today like this: throw the book at them.
Right.
Do we throw books at people? No, that's not what that means. Should you throw rocks at people? No, that's not what that means. It means if someone is such an outlier that in the 3.5 years of the second half of end times, they can't accept what's going on, you need to open the book and say, well, wait a minute, what religion are you? Oh, conveniently, you were a Christian. Great. Let me tell you what Christianity was actually talking about. Here, I've got a sword to show you. I've got my sword right here, so I can just point it out. So that's how that is how you would stone them to death. What does it mean by death? Well, there's two different kinds of death. There's physical death, the second death, which is the death of your body. And then there's the first death, which is the death of mind or bad ideas. And we've all had the death of Santa Claus. We've all had that by the time you get to our age.
Sure.
I hope you have. But you'll have the death of other ideas as you go through learning and refining, changing your mapping of reality to the actuality as much as possible. You will have a lot of these deaths. You've already had a bunch of them.
Absolutely.
And that's the kind of death there. Now, could you change your mind when you're dead? Physically dead? Could you do that?
No.
So, no, you don't change your mind. The dead know nothing. Just like atheists think. When you're dead, you're flipping dead.
Right.
So you have no opportunity to learn something while you're physically dead. That's not going to happen. So you have to have the first death come before the second death, which is why the first death is called the first death. The death of ideas or repentance. I've repented Santa Claus. I've repented the Easter Bunny. I don't believe those things anymore. So does it make sense that you should stone someone to death and that's a good and moral thing? Well, in context, yes. But to the NIFB, it means take rocks and kill people. But then the text says love thy neighbor. So which is it?
Right.
Love thy neighbor, kill the homosexuals. Which is it? Because it can't be both.
Right.
The floor is yours. That was a huge rambling on.
That was good. That was a good little rant. No, that's
what it takes to flush these things out. I mean, that's just that was.
I'm getting a clearer picture of what what the hero and his disciples will be doing. And that's that all tracks really well.
Mm-hmm.
And for sure, there's an inconsistency against any kind of like violence or hatred or whatever, and God
Sure.
and goodness.
God
And
is love. Kill the Amalekites.
yeah, I mean, we just
Sure.
can't have that. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't,
It's
it
like,
just doesn't
Christian,
work.
what are you talking about?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's an old problem. I mean, that problem right there. I guess it's the problem of evil, but it's just a cheekier version of it. Yeah, but um, it's like very specific biblical evil.
Right.
Well, okay,
But
so
there's go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I do have a little bit of a. It's inconsequential though, but I have an inconsequential objection, but that rises up in my mind when we start to paint these pictures and stuff.
Everything matters.
So the fact is, during is am I there?
You're back.
Okay, cool. The the spirits are interfering. So okay, the fact is, during the time that that the historical Jesus, whether or not he really existed, walked around, people were getting stoned for homosexuality, like that, or for similar sins. Literally,
Yes.
stones thrown at them, and they were dying, like that.
Yes.
That was a thing, and it was a thing around the time when we think those laws were written down.
Yes.
So I think about that, and I feel like that historical reality supports that understanding of it as well, because it does track as well that the writings were reflecting what was going on already, like they were writing down what was already operating in society at the time, which is, I think how most at least secular historians consider, the
Sure.
Old Testament, and possibly religious historians as well,
Sure.
so that's just not like, I don't have any problem with that idea that what they were writing down was just a illogical but horrendous thing that was going on, and you reconcile it with a logical consistency, and
Sure.
with the ideas that that God is real and that the angels are real, and that this is also describing a future event, or this is really only describing a future event from our point of view. Do you see the kind of the conflict that I'm
I
struggling
do.
with there? Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I think I do. Tell me if I say something stupid. You feel free to just tell me.
All
Okay.
right. On. Yeah. Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Of
Always.
course.
If I don't
Okay.
address it, just say no. That's not what I meant.
Yeah.
Just stop me before I rattle on too far. Don't waste our time.
Okay.
Okay. So, um, in the idea that future events are explained through animism, that it's using real world things to describe future events, which is why sometimes they have to make up stories that never did happen and situations that never did happen, because it wouldn't always work. You can use what is to explain the future. Sometimes you gotta alter it a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
So were people actually considering those things to be like societal practices at the time? Were they societal practices at the time? Do they show up scripted, commentary in that society at that time? Yes, absolutely. Is it talking about that? No. And that's maybe even you could see that as a bit of a cop out, possibly.
No,
But
I think you just described the conflict. Yeah, that's the problem. Like,
right.
that assertion is the problem. Like, why not? Like, why isn't it talking about
And
that?
here's the hidden assumption. that the Bible should have been written to correct something. That's the hidden assumption there. It's not trying to correct something. It's only using
Right.
natural environment to describe future event. So it's not even commentary on whether or not people should have had slaves. It's not talking about that.
It's looking at a society that has slaves and saying,
Just like this
can
thing you
map
do experience,
prophecy onto
slavery,
this.
there is going to be a time
Right.
where it has to be decided who you are slave to. And that's why the word aved contains the idea of volunteer worshiping, for instance.
Huh.
Now, slaves don't voluntarily worship their master or father. They don't. But that's part of the definition of the word.
Huh. Okay. I mean, I guess they could.
I don't think
know.
it would be common. It shouldn't. I mean, it
No.
could be an extreme outlier
Stockholm.
and be true in reality. Stockholm syndrome, yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. It could happen, but I don't think on average it does happen, and that makes for a bad definition. When you start defining things that are exceptional as part of the normative definition of something, you've missed the point of the definition.
Okay. So I'm sold on that. There's definitely also aspects of the description that just don't match up with history. So that's definitely true.
And you'll find that in all of these things.
Right.
It's not just the word father, the word master, the word slave, which is actually slave only appears once in the King James. It's normatively servant.
Okay.
But that doesn't change it. That doesn't change it. Still the same things apply.
Right.
It just sounds a little softer. I think they didn't like the word slave. But even 1611, 1610, 1608, they didn't like the word slave. But that's beside the point. But that's it's true in all of it, which is why you end up with scholars saying things like the anti-homosexual law is not talking about adults, who can give consent, who are further apart than
Right.
second cousin. It's talking about if you're with someone too close of kin or your own child, your own aunt, your own uncle, things like this is what it's talking about. Which is and that's fairly recent scholarship, that there's scholars that we've gotten down to the nitty gritty at that level now, where they're going, you know what? Actually, in context, this is what it's saying is, don't be doing that stuff with your nearest kin, which most of us can agree
Oh,
with.
interesting. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it's like
definitely.
it's more like you shouldn't, if you're a homosexual adult male, you should not be taking advantage of your your in the middle of pubescent nephew. You shouldn't be doing that. It's
Right.
more like that.
Yeah, definitely don't.
Because
Yeah.
I don't even need to explain why.
Right.
So that's the way they're looking
Right.
at it today, right? That's
I didn't know
what it's
that.
talking
That's
about.
interesting.
Yeah.
But it's
but
not
I would
even
say,
talking about that.
but I'd say it's not even talking about that. It's
Right.
talking about being an extreme outlier when what is evidently necessary in your environment you're ignoring.
Right.
So it uses sexuality that way, but it uses a lot of things that way. Like it uses the idea of witchcraft that way.
Right.
That if you're a superstitious, when you believe in things that you don't understand and you suffer, superstition is your way. And the superstitious people are the religious people,
Right.
the traditional religious people. So in a scenario where heaven is physical and literal spaceships showing up in our atmosphere, and angels are physical, literally perfectly evolved, fully evolved human beings, and you can't accept that, you got a mental problem there.
Right. Right.
Because of your tradition, you're like not accepting your reality. And that
Right.
makes you this extreme outlier when most of the people have already ascended. Well, now you need an outlier group to make an example of this. So they use outlier groups.
Gotcha.
Not that there's something unnatural about being an outlier. That's not what it's talking about.
And
I
so
get
this would
this
be the.
accusation a lot.
Oh, let's see.
You've probably heard me accused of this. Well, Richard, you're just trying to like make it softer so more people will accept it. No, I'm not.
Huh.
The first time I read it, coached in what I would call prayer. You can say, Richard, you never did pray. Fine. But in what I perceived as prayer, the first time I read it, it was consistent with itself. The first time. And I hadn't studied any scholars, and I hadn't studied any Christians, really. I mean, I had, before the age of accountability, I had Christian upbringing, but I didn't really care about it. That wasn't my thing. I wasn't into it. In fact, a lot of it really irked me, and I didn't know why. It really tweaked something in my gut whenever the preacher would, which he called himself a priest because it was Catholicism, but whenever the preacher would say Jesus or God, I got this twinge in my gut, and I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what it was because I was too young to process what was wrong.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, it just tweaked me every time, every Sunday, every Easter.
I know the feeling you're talking about. What
Yeah,
a terrible feeling. Yeah.
it is. And when you know something's wrong and you can't put your
Yeah,
finger
that's
on it,
just
you're not
something's
allowed
wrong,
to
but you
ask.
don't know what.
Yeah, and you're not allowed to ask.
Yeah.
Like, anyway.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not trying to soften this to make it more
Skyworks, I
likable.
love.
What's that, Matt? Go ahead. Max,
I
say it
just
again.
wanted to shout out to Skyworks. Sorry. Second.
No, I want you to say
just
it, but
wanted
your
to say
microphone cut out and nobody heard you.
Skyworks, Gotcha. So I'm just works. I like you. Bringing the questions, you know.
Right
Those
on.
are good questions. That's all.
Right on.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, I agree. They're good questions. I like these kinds of questions. See, if the Christian says, my God is love, because the text says God is love, and then part of that love is destroying the mass of the population who got religion and God wrong, then what that says is the God itself is not consistent. If you have an inconsistent God, I don't know why you would call it God. I don't see an inconsistent God in the stories. I see a consistent God. But I see that the text is being written, leaving people free will. That is, they're free to object. They're free to reject it. And that's fine. Excuse me. And that's absolutely fine. It's designed to be allowed to be rejected on purpose. Because if it was objectively, obviously true, we'd all be of one religion. We wouldn't have these wars. We wouldn't have suffering. We'd be really good to each other, and there'd be no point in us not being in heaven. Might as well just be in heaven. So instead, it's left this way on purpose, so that people can look at it and reject it. So that Christians can say ridiculous things like, my God is love who hates Esau.
Right.
But you can't have love inconsistent. That doesn't make sense. And I'm not trying to find a way to justify it. It's if you're serious enough and you study all of it thoroughly, you just see that what it means by stone is teach. You just see it. It's just there. So.
Huh. And sword is truth. And what are the horns? What are the brass horns? The nations?
Oh, the four corners of the earth.
Oh. Where are those?
East, north, south, and west.
Oh,
in
okay.
that order.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's the same as the angels parked at the four corners of the earth, not touching the great river Euphrates. It means they're over the horizon and you can't see them.
Oh, sure.
They're on the extremes of the earth, the horns. And it says it several times that way. I mean, It's not exactly guesswork.
Right.
It's just the Christians have taken something expressive, like the four cardinal directions,
Hmm.
that kind of four horns, and they've like imagined it as something physical and tangible and in your immediate
Right.
location, like a brass horn, literally a brass horn on like a table with a
Right.
grate, like a grate table, grated table with stuff burning on top of it. Anyway,
Making me hungry.
I try not to laugh. I try not to laugh about this stuff because they're super serious about it, but it's hard for me to not laugh at them,
It's
you know?
okay.
And I kind of feel bad if I do laugh at them,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. You don't mean it.
it's like telling someone their mom's ugly, you
Right.
know, and
It's
like
true.
meaning it. Like, look, there's
Yeah.
your mom. She's ugly.
Yeah. It's
You
very
know,
personal. Yeah.
it's super personal, and I mean, and it's not persuasive.
Right.
If I
That's
if
true.
I just if I just say to the Christian, look, you're stupid. Okay, I'm sorry you're stupid, but you're damn stupid.
Right.
Okay, and your religion has nothing to do with this Bible. It has everything to do with your church, which is
I
why all these different churches can look at it different ways, and they got all these people that agree. It's not about the Bible.
right. I have heard you accuse atheists of acting or thinking like Christians
I've seen it.
in a pejorative way.
Yeah. Well, I've seen it too many times. I get sick of seeing it.
No, it's like every time. Every time
Yeah.
you get in an argument with an atheist, it's because they're thinking like a Christian or they're projecting those kind of thinking, their thought processes onto you. You're like, that's
Yeah.
not what I'm doing. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing Christian.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Had a show the other day, one on one with an atheist,
Oh
which
yeah.
his name is Nate, and he's an atheist, and I thought that was really witty. I want to talk to this guy.
Yeah, for sure. How'd that go?
And then I saw him on EA Dawa, and he did very well there.
Nice.
Although sometimes he was having trouble, like accepting the concept as they were explaining it, and instead of immediately throwing away what rumors he'd heard about the religion, he
Right.
had a little bit of sticking, but
That's
you
hard.
could tell he was trying,
Yeah.
right?
That kind of stuff's hard. That brain rigidity. I mean, it's a thing. People just
So
can't like quickly
it,
switch assumptions.
it
You
is
know?
tough. It's super tough.
Yeah.
So considers himself an evidentialist, right? And there was a few atheists in the side chat, and he's an atheist, of course.
Hmm.
And I said, I closed out the show by giving him some challenging things that he should think about his view of reality. Because we spent the whole show like critiquing my view of reality, which is fine. That's why I open it up for that, right? But I said to him, do you know what mentalism is?
Hmm.
Where you make suggestions to a person, and the likelihood of them coming up with a certain answer out of those suggestions has a high probability because of human nature.
Right.
Like if you say pumpkin and then the number 7, a lot of people will think carrot. If you ask them to choose a vegetable, they'll think carrot.
Oh, huh.
Like that happens a lot. Like there's all kinds of things like that people can do, and that's what mentalism is. So what mentalism is like making suggestions based on the human animal, and then they'll come up with what a human animal comes up with, right? So the idea is the power of suggestion. That's the whole idea. So what I said to him is, in all scientific experiments, part of the description of the experiment is the expected result. Isn't that suggestive?
Interesting. Of course it is.
It's super suggestive. It's
Yeah.
telling you what to expect.
Yeah.
And then when you get that, then you did it right. And if you don't get that, then
Right.
you did it wrong.
I mean,
Holy crap, that you can't get more biased than that.
It's really true. You should go into experiments with zero expectations, or you should
Right.
be a different person than the person performing the experiment. You should
Right.
like the person
Like if the
evaluating it.
professor read the expected result, fine. As long as
Right,
they never express it to the person performing the experiment. And
right,
then if it turns out different than that, go figure out why. And
right,
that would be pure science. But we don't even do pure science
right. Of course not.
because we have our mind. I mean, what if the little quantum effects add up to a big quantum effect sometimes in some controlled situations?
Hmm.
What if we're actually making the speed of light?
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying? And we can't know. And and I'm not doing it as an appeal to ignorance. I'm just talking about what humans are. So when religious people do this, and if you do this, you're no less religious.
Right,
You're not less religious. It's just a different topic. It's just
right.
not about God.
That's great. All right, Richard. Well, I'm gonna call it for this show.
Okay. Tweet.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's another
Thank you.
quick hour, quick hour plus.
Oh, it has
Um,
been. You're right.
yeah, yeah.
Well, brother,
So
thank you for your time as always.
yeah,
And we will preemptively thank Zebra for when he can show up.
absolutely. Thank you
Awesome.
too. Peace and respect, and I'll see you soon, brother. Thank you.
Peace and respect. Thank you very much. Uh, I'm feeling pretty energetic. If you guys want to throw something in the side chat, we'll try to get to some of those. Let's see. Jamie Russell wrote, "Peace and respect, Jamie Russell. Thank you for dropping by. Appreciate that. If God didn't make the first 7-day week and invent animal sacrifice in the beginning, the whole thing is obviously BS. Chew on that." You're a really smart guy, Jamie. I like your brain, but I don't always understand it well. Um, the word God that you're referring to in God made, make, that word God is Elohim, a plural. It's not your monotheistic God. Chew on that. The word made there that you wrote make, which is fine for context for this. The word made, as in create, right there, which is what you're referring to, majoratively means to reform and repurpose a thing. Chew on that. The 7-day week. The seventh is the Sabbath, which is when God rests. God has never rested from man. God can't be resting from man. There's been no Sabbath of God. Chew on that. A week, well, it works out really good for the cycle of the earth and the calendar and stuff like that, that we break down the cycle into 7 repeating days. That works out just fine, and we've held to that because it's just so darn convenient. But the Bible isn't talking about a week. It's not what it's talking about. And if it is, not every society on this earth follows a 7-day week or always has, in which case the Bible doesn't apply to them. And if your Bible doesn't apply to them, how can you call it universal? Chew on that. Inventing animal sacrifice. If you destroy an earth, whatever is not sampled off of the earth in the 14 and 4 is going to burn to a crisp. And that will be a pleasing aroma to God because that's the end of the earth and that one's done, and then God can rest on the Sabbath. And that is all consistent within the text. But it's not talking about purposeful sacrifice of animals and that's pleasing to God. It's talking about when the covenant is complete, that's pleasing to God. And he'll know because the earth's on fire. It's a lake of fire. It's destroyed. And that's the end of it. That's the end of that story. Chew on that. And no, the stuff is not BS because people, practicing Christians, are normally taking it as historical into moral. I take it as moral described as historical. And which is more important, history or present morality? Which do you think is more important? Chew on that. Not that I'm offended by your chew on that, but it was cocky. and you have no way to back up your cockiness. So that's what I think of that. Jamie Russell also, I'm going to get to you, Harpo Blues. I appreciate the input. That seems evident to me based on what it claims. If those ideas weren't from God, the whole Jesus died for sins, which is the faith, is false. If our faith would be false if not for the death and resurrection of Christ. I totally agree. And there's a line that says, I think it's in Paul's writings, that says exactly that. Yes, if there wasn't a past earth where the Father did the things of Christ, which Christ reads of later, I do as my Father before me. Accept that. Accept that Jesus is doing what the Father did before him. Accept it right now. Now go ahead and accept it. If that's true, then yes, there's a cycle of earths. Yes, end times happens to an earth. We must trust in that. Yes, through the power of the Father, someone in charge of a Class 4 Kardashev civilization can resurrect a dead body, and that matters because that's our heaven, and they really care and they really understand what the human animal is, even to the point they know what life is. They know what life is, not what the experience of life is. Like, what is the chemistry of life? They know that, and that's super impressive. Then they have every way to persuade us that should be necessary to persuade us to convince us to take the ascension. Perfect. And if none of that's true, then our faith is built on nothing. I totally agree. I don't agree with the way that you're reading it, however, because what you're talking about here is magic thinking. And I don't see the necessity for reading magic into the Bible, which you have to read it into the Bible. It's not there. My idea of God being a set of principles and not being of any sort, and the difference, as you see it, between God and the Father. God is the Yod-He Vav-He, the contract or covenant. Jehovah, otherwise called. The Father, on the other hand, is an angel who conducts end times, which is always the case. Look at Ragnar and Ragnarok. That the Father conducts the end times. He's adherent to the contract, the covenant. But that doesn't make him the covenant, just any more than you could be adherent to the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. That doesn't make you the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. It makes you an American citizen. They're citizens of heaven. It's like rapid fire. I like this. Before the fall, when did God order Adam to perform animal sacrifices? Oh, you're asking that of Jamie Russell. I just saw the question. Thank you, John, for dropping by. Give you guys one more minute due to delay to type something if you want to. And I don't mind you being rough, but be logical rough. And you guys have been, and I appreciate that. I'm not saying you hadn't been. I'm going through the side chat presently, trying to see if there's anything that maybe I didn't notice before. No, God isn't exactly an idea held in the mind of theists. God is a contract that angels agree to in their acts onto the earth in end times. And then it will rest. Once we're off the earth, it rests. Okay, let me go back down to the bottom. See if you guys are right. Peace and respect, Von Erich. You're late, young sir. Just kidding. Sorry you missed most of it. Von Erich, right now I'm doing tough questions. If you have a tough challenging question that's biblically based or religiously based, I would receive it right now and try to answer to you. Khalil's argument is a shell game. That just makes you sound Christian. Are you a Christian, Skyworks? What do you mean it's a shell game built on assumptions? And which argument? The argument that I mentioned earlier? Skyworks, if you're still here, would you please clarify this comment? Khalil's argument is a shell game. Khalil's favorite argument, I think, is from necessity and stuck on a word. Help. Contingent. Necessary and contingent. Yeah, I think there's nothing in the Bible that says that Jesus is God at all. He does once accept worship. I think it was just like contingency argument. Thank you, Skyworks. I think he accepts it maybe because just worn out and just tired of arguing about it, or maybe that just wasn't the topic at the time. I don't know, but never does like Jesus claim to be God. Jesus does claim to have like the same mission as the Father. Peace and respect, secular pagan mom. Thanks for dropping by. Hello and merry meet. I love that. It sounds so, I don't know, jovial and pleasant. I really like it. Peace and respect, Renee. Where was I? Father is not God and Jesus is not God. Right. Okay. So, like, I have to follow local law, and that's how I can call myself a citizen, right? So Jesus follows that law for that situation that is called Jehovah, right? So he agrees because he sees the importance of it, so he does it. All right. Now, he's taught by the Father. So the Bible's consistent when it says to Moses, teach Aaron, and to Aaron you will be God. Same thing again. Teach the Son, so to the Son you will be God. So it uses it that way. To the Son, the Father is God. Why? Because he's the teacher. They have a personal relationship. Jesus gets all his facts from the Father, gets all of his understanding of the whole meaning of Jehovah and what it all entails, and the seven spirits and all that. He gets that understanding from the Father. Why? Try praying to the Constitution. Go ahead. Knock yourself out. Try to just intuit what's written in the Constitution without someone explaining to it or reading it yourself. Okay? And by the way, you might just need a constitutional lawyer to explain a lot of what's in the Constitution. Because, well, that's not your field of study, and it's brand new to you. So, a constitutional lawyer, that replacing in this expression the Father, is not the Constitution. He's the explainer of the Constitution. And if you're becoming a constitutional lawyer, another the Father, that is, you're the Jesus Christ, then to you, your teacher is the law. You like have to trust them. They have to be an authority. They have to be right about it. And that until you get to their level, you're not engaging with the Constitution yourself. You're learning about how to engage with the Constitution. So, and then there's some 1,000-year gap before Jesus is the Father and he conducts his own end times, which is why this 1,000-year thing and this repeating cycle thing is so often in the text. I want a better, fancier sounding word than often, but often works. Don't fight with the scammers, John Fapiano. Enjoy messing with the scammers. There's people on YouTube that do that. They just mess with the scammers. Learn how to do that if you have scammers in your life. Sorry for your struggle. Okay, guys. I suppose that's good enough for a Wednesday, isn't it? Peace and respect to you all. I look forward to the day that we are all humans on this earth, all of us, all great friends with all of us, all of each other. Yeah, there's the key to it right there. SPM. Waste their time as much as you can. Till next time, guys.